very good morning to all of you. Thank you so much. I think yesterday, while just scrolling through the chat, I realized all of us together have exchanged 54 emails. So this video is a product of all those 54 different conversations we've had. So thank you so much, firstly, for being so patient throughout this entire time. What we want to do as a part of the CCAMP Stories of Hope is largely to capture the emotion of being hopeful in this very testing times that we've been put through, and how startups are helming this change from the very front. And what are these startups doing? What kind of change are they bringing? What are what's working for them and what's not working for them? Which is where the role of CCAMP and a lot of incubators and partners comes in. So through this conversation, of course, we want to highlight all of your roles and to tell the larger world that all is not gone for India or the Indian innovation space. So firstly, thank you so much for being a part of the conversation. And I'm personally looking forward to all the sharing that's going to follow hereafter. So thank you and welcome on board. Nandita, I will start this session with you. We've been hearing about CCAMP's CCDA initiative. So I want you to run us through this program and how our company is chosen to be a part of this program.
Yeah, thanks, Shruti. Happy to be here. I didn't realize we exchanged 54 emails. So I don't know whether that's good or bad. But to come back to CCDA, I think it was actually an absolute visionary sort of a call that Taslim had. Dr. Taslim Arif Sayed, who's our CEO and director. He saw the opportunity because we had quite a few startups who had the potential to bring out products at this critical time. And that's when he said and decided that let's see if we can do something for this thing. This is an opportunity for us. And so he the team sort of converged to see what we could do. We called it was a very specific kind of a mission in that way. So CCDA, as you know, is the CCAMP COVID Innovation Deployment Accelerator. So very specific innovations that can be deployed will be accelerated, right? Because time and speed was the need of the hour. So we launched CCDA, as we all call it now, and as we all know it now. Soon after the lockdown. In fact, just before the lockdown. And it was basically a call to anyone or everyone. It was not restricted to this thing. We had people from outside India also. So we launched a call. We can say it was a nationwide call, asking to for applications. And the criteria mainly was anything that was near deployment ready. And what we thought is that we would look at these and see how we could quickly deploy this, whatever interventions would be required to deploy it, whatever those gaps were. Maybe if this, as we all know, unusual times call for unusual measures. Probably some of these products would have taken longer to launch or get deployed, because obviously getting into the market is a challenge. But because of the the criticality of what was required, I think we launched this and were able to identify a few startups that met this criteria. Primary criteria was close to deployment. So you should have a product ready, and there should be some elements that are missing where CCAMP can help. These things could have been funding, could have been, some help with some other issues, or just deploying in the market. So.
Right. Very interesting to know that, Nandita. Moving on to Sundar and Sridhar, both of you are alumni from prestigious institutions like IIT Bombay and have industry experience in a sector far away from healthcare. So can you please walk us through your past journey? Like, what kind of learnings are you bringing to this current venture, Ubiqare?
Yeah. So primarily, you're right. Our experience has been primarily into semiconductors and embedded space. And both of us are basically graduates from electrical engineering department. We have 30 plus years of experience in the corporate world. During our journey, of course, we have actually been looking at seeing what we could do to make an impact to the society. At the same time, choose an area which can bring in business, that it's profitable, sustainable, and can lead an impact. We were considering, we were having discussion. We were close friends. We were having discussions even while we were in a corporate life as to what other various things can be done. I mean, most of us, my father died of cancer. Somebody's father died of some chronic stage. Where both of us found that there was a lot of things which could have been better in terms of bringing the care to our near and dear ones. At that point of time, we saw that there was a lot of technology progress in terms of having certain things in the healthcare space was already there. Unfortunately, it is not the technology not being available, it is the deployment of the technology for a specific end use case is still missing. And we thought maybe that's a good idea to actually go all the way to go an end-to-end solution in a space of healthcare. And that's what has got us here. And we are here. We started the company in 2017 and pretty much the journey is still on. And thanks to CCAMP and Social Alpha, we're able to continue and look at the...
Yeah. So in a sense, it's actually a continuation of the journey, I quite agree. Because when we started off from our IIT days, both Sridhar and I were actually looking for problems to solve. I mean, we used to seek out companies coming for recruitment and tell them that give us a problem that we can define, identify, characterize, and then solve the problem, right? And subsequent to that, I spent myself about 13 years in Crompton Greaves trying to solve problems which India was facing at that time in terms of automating power plants, process plants, and a lot of product development, solving field problems. That took a lot of time, and it was very satisfying actually at the end of the day when you launch a product and it solves real problems, business problems.
Right.
And then moving on to addressing large software development globally, right? I mean, that became a natural extension of that. So what kind of problems do they exist? And that took me to Philips, NXP, Infineon, Intel, and things like that. Again, you can say it's a continuation of the journey in one sense, that you just expanded the scope. And then, of course, back to India, where I tried to, through Intel, I tried to work on solving telecom problems in the rural India. And then, of course, finally, we joined this healthcare. And with healthcare, again, it's about what problems can we solve, right? I mean, essentially, it's, see, after 30 plus years, you develop an unbeatable breadth of expertise, right? I mean, it becomes agnostic to domains and technologies, right? It doesn't matter what technology, what domain it is. And that's kind of wisdom that grows in. There will, of course, be a few depths that you would be very good at, and that we recognize. In that sense, both Sridhar and I complement each other quite radically. I mean, there are things that I'm very good at, there are things that he's very good at, and we make sure that we leverage both of these things. Yeah. So a lot of learnings, of course.
Basically, you're a very good team.
Oh, yeah.
We hope so.
Just one request before I go to my next question. If all of you can speak one notch higher than you're speaking, the volume, it's a little less audible, just as louder as you can. Okay. Sundar and Sridhar, most business ideas have an aha moment from where it originates. So what's your story? Where did it begin from?
Shall I go first?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. So for me, it was about, first was the choice to get into healthcare. I think that took us a lot of deliberations. Why healthcare? And then the choice for us to make was based on that that's a very fertile ground for bringing our competence of technology and solution building to this area. Having done that, we also realized suddenly, with 30 plus years experience, hey, you are getting into a field which you know nothing about, and how can we be arrogant enough to say that we can innovate, right? So we said, all right, we may need to immerse ourselves in that, and then that set off in motion a lot of immersion. Sridhar was had already taken that step prior to me, and he was already doing some project work in Tumkur, trying to connect virtual OPDs and things like that. And I was peripherally supporting him. And subsequently to that, we actually talked to a lot of doctors, a lot of patients, a lot of industry players, collected a lot of data. I think it took about 6 months, 6 to 7 months for us, because we had to address all the dimensions, the problem dimension, the solution dimension, the economics, the business part of it, the competition. And it could be overwhelming, but fortunately for us, since we had come with so much of experience, we had a lot of knowledge of using frameworks, thinking frameworks ourselves, how to sort out the problems, how to identify. We finally narrowed down on a beachhead segment. That suddenly made sense. That beachhead segment turned out to be a palliative care segment. And in this, Sridhar had a natural presence there because he was already running an NGO called Sanman. I think that was one. All came together in terms of complexity, in terms of need for technology, in terms of unmet need, and also for me the aha moment came when after we had distilled out three pivotal elements for the solution. A few days or a week after that, we came across a paper published in JAMA journal. That was a report of a clinical study done in Sweden on palliative care patients using IoT devices, and they reported out of those three, they reported 2 of those elements as pivotal in having better outcome at patients. Right. So for us, the message was very clear. We are on the right path, and this is how it is.
Yeah, actually, most of it Sundar already mentioned. But as I mentioned to you, healthcare we got into primarily with what we seen in our respective families, the journey we embarked in.
Right.
And as part of a project, once you get in together, we spend about 6 months to understand what are the areas. And like Sundar said, we basically identified palliative care could be the beachhead, and let's get into that. So we combined technology. We had a piece of technology to basically have doctors talk to the patient and supervise and guide what is happening at home. And on the other side, we had partnered with a couple of nurses and others to actually go and start this thing, start the process of actually providing care to patients at home who would need such a remote extension of specialist care.
Right.
The very first time, I mean, it took us some time to get the first and second patients. And in that journey, when the patients were actually getting what we intended as a plan, and then you see that, oh, they're really getting benefited, and somebody tells us, this is the impact which you have caused us. That is when that aha kind of flicked in, saying, oh, it's really true. I mean, it's really what we are imagining is really coming into the fore. And that was a good kick. And that was an aha moment at that point of time.
How nice. But how, Sundar and Sridhar, how do you define specialty care in India and specialty care largely? What is Ubiqare's primary feature? If you have to endorse it once, how would you put it in the market?
So what we are looking at when you say specialty care is the patient journey, typically, if you broadly categorize into various phases, somebody has an illness, a complex illness, there's a diagnosis. So where they'll be doing consultation, OPD. Eventually, it'll get some treatment in hospital. Maybe there'll be some operation, or there may be some chemo, or there will be something. Post the IPD phase, there will be a recuperative phase, or let's say post a follow-up care phase, which could extend anywhere from a month, 2 months to 3 months to years also, depending upon the type of complex illnesses. So what we are focusing is the follow-up care stage for complex illnesses requires specific assistance. So that's what we call the specialty care. So if you talk about cancer, you talk about stroke, you talk about any such chronic kidney, chronic OPD, I mean, kind of diseases, this require a mechanism of a specific protocol of a care which needs to be followed, certain compliance of which needs to be followed, and it requires an attention which is more than primary care. It requires a doctor, a qualified doctor who's experienced in this to provide such a care. Most of the home care during those days when we started were missing this. So when we call about specialist care, we are talking about extending the specialist protocol, having a doctor-driven care to ensure that whatever interventions physically are happening and whatever guidance the patients and the caregivers and the family would want is coming from a doctor extending the specialist care. That is what we mean by specialist care.
Yeah.
Right.
And just to add to that, there was also a certain element of choice in selecting that word, right? It was provocative. I mean, people were talking of care at home care and everything, but nobody had actually segmented the different kinds of care. So there was some care called critical care. There was some care called ICU at home.
Right.
We chose the word specialty care because we were also inspired by the notion how nice it would be if the same specialist treating you were to continue the care at home.
At home.
To see you through, right? And so that specialty care became a little bit of an opener. People would ask, hey, will the specialist come home? Almost, he will not come home, but then you can get the care. So there was a little bit of thought in choosing that word as well.
What kind of medical technology are we talking about here? And how do you feel Ubiqare is filling this gap?
Yeah, I think from a technology point of view, having come from technology background, we actually could have chosen a lot of technical devices and technology devices to put in place, right? But then our 30 plus years experience told us that you should not feed people more than what they can consume, right? So at that point of time, the most glaring need of people was the attention of the specialist and somebody whom the specialist trusts would be physically assisting them at home. So the physical touch and the expertise was the most important needs of that, right? So for us, the technology part of it or the medical part of it would be how can we monitor the patient regularly? How can the data of monitoring be made available to the specialist? How can the specialist be present and involved, if from remote, in guiding the care for the patient? And finally, how would, if somebody were to go and do something, how can that be organized? So the technology, those were the technologies which was largely telemedicine technology, healthcare protocol-based care, the workflows, and the coordination of physical activities, physical interventions with the medical expertise. So these were the 4 areas of technology that we wanted to go in right now at this point of time. There would, of course, we can visualize, and we do visualize a roadmap of more and more technology coming in to make this whole process, this core process, smoother. But essentially, the core process is extending the care of the specialist to the patient at home through a collaborative team and through well-defined protocols.
True. In fact, the collaborative team is the key. Basically, what we are saying is that as we can add, like Sundar mentioned, we can keep adding technology because that is the background which we came in. So we wanted to look into say what makes an impact at this point of time, and looking at the fact that there are various stakeholders clinically who are touching the patient at different points of time. How do the team work together as a team is some mechanism. And of course, we adopted telemedicine platform to actually build this.
Right. Very interesting. But Sridhar and Sundar, in 2017, when you entered this healthcare market, what was the market size that you were tapping into? And today, what has changed? Like, how many patients subscribe to Ubiqare services, and in what regions are you present already?
Yeah, that's interesting because owing to our background of that experience, unless until there is a sizable market size and we actually do that study, it becomes difficult. So we were looking at what is the way to approach this in terms of and sizing this market. So we looked at different studies. So first and foremost thing, we're extending the care to patients at home. So it's a home care. So we looked at what is the home care market. Fortunately, by the time already there are a lot of established home care players, organized and unorganized. And there is a market study which talked about a huge $1 billion kind of industry, which of course right now they're talking about 12 billion by 2025 as an industry to reach out to the home care market. we looked at saying that, okay, there's a home care market. We're talking about specialist extension. All the people who are doing home care would definitely not need a specialist extension. What would be this kind of a size? Well, obviously, there was no such detailed study, or the different market reports available with respect to what resources we have may be limited. So we went and did a different study. We said, okay, what is the disease burden in India for cancer, stroke, some of the chronic diseases? In this disease burden, suppose we were to focus only in metros, tier 1 and tier 2 type of cities, with a specific kind of an income. And if you're looking at all the different population who will be having it, and a percentage of this population who would probably need this kind of a care, we came across even that is a huge size, about 280 million, about 250 million kind of people who need such a follow-up care. Now, if you actually multiply that, it seems to be much more than a $12 billion industry. But anyway, we actually saying that there is a huge segment of population where this need exists. And there is as it is, the home care market is growing, and the technology aspects of the market actually is growing in. Right now, for example, telemedicine is earmarked to be 5.5 billion by 2025. So if you look at the intersection, it is on a SAM part of it, it could still be $1 billion industry. So the question right now is what can be done to effectively tap that becomes a more of situation where we focused on.
Sundar, do you want to add anything? You're on mute, I think, Sundar.
No, I think Sridhar covered it well, so nothing to add.
Sure. So apart from addressing a huge medical gap, your product is also addressing a social gap, right? So for patients of all kinds who need rigorous support, so especially emotional. So I want to understand, how are you addressing this social gap?
Yeah, I think fortunately for us, we started off with palliative care. That defined our procedures, that defined our working ethos and everything, right? So palliative care in its roots itself encompasses all these needs of a patient. It's not just a medical need, right? So there is a strong medical component to it.
Right.
And then some of the elements of palliative care, like empathy towards the patient. So the doctors whom we recruited, for example, where they underwent training on palliative care. They learned how to communicate difficult messages to the patient and the caregivers, and how to help them accept the situation as it is. Sridhar himself had a lot of exposure because of his NGO in Sanman, where his organization used to train volunteers, and those volunteers in turn would go and hold patients. So all that's got baked into our DNA as such, right? And so we became very patient centric in terms of catering to their needs. Having said that, there are many other mechanisms or many other solutions which are available, but there is also some resistance to accepting those. For example, there are counselors available to talk to, but then not everybody accepts those kind of counseling.
Right.
And then again, if it is chargeable, there is a certain further questioning on why do I need this, right? So those things will take some time to get across.
Right.
Though of course I see now that things are changing. Post-pandemic, a lot of people are asking for, hey, I do have a mental problem. I would like to talk to somebody, or I need to sort this out. So I see those kind of changes are happening, but it's still a long way to go from a purely bridging the social gap that you mentioned here.
Sridhar, do you want to add?
No, that's correct actually. In fact, the cry for help from different people comes in different contexts in different way. So the question right now, like Sundar mentioned, right, trained clinical staff who are able to advise appropriately does bring the impact. But there's, like you said, there's a way. There's a lot of distance to be covered because people don't recognize some of these issues. So you just have to have a trained person talk to them so that the right impact can be made. Absolutely correct.
Right. So to address the elephant in the room, has COVID-19 pandemic been a boon or a bane to you? how did you repurpose the Ubiqare platform to fit into this demand?
Yeah. So it's a mixed bag. You look at it in two ways. Pre-pandemic, even adopting the telemedicine platform itself was a big undercoats issue, because different specialists, different doctors, different people looked at it in a different context. So we had a lot of things coming in. So adapting telemedicine was a problem by itself. So adapting technology or virtual technologies to reach out to patients at home has definitely got a lot of acceptance by the pandemic. So any technology solutions which you are bringing in, we can say it definitely is a boon, right?
Right.
Now there's the other part of the story too, because what happens here is that we have been taking care of cancer patients. We've been taking care of chronic patients. So the journey during the pandemic was like a what are we saying, ups and downs, in the sense that there were times when there were hardly any patients getting into the hospital, and so we have suddenly we're a startup trying to basically serve different patients at home. So suddenly there was a lull in terms of number of patients who these cancer patients or chronic patients who wanted such a service. There's a huge dip. Specialists were not seeing them, and everything else started focusing on the COVID. Fortunately, during that period of time, BIRAC, and in fact CCAMP, basically gave us a mentorship and also guidance, saying that why don't you repurpose your platform for COVID? Being part of CCIDA and looking at BIRAC support, we actually started working, even before BIRAC came with the grant and the project proposal we put in, we started working with repurposing a platform, saying that, okay, why, if this is a pandemic, and the pandemic, a lot of 80% of the population is going to be asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic, which can be taken care of at home. Obviously, our platform can definitely help. Why not we start? And that's where we actually embrace that COVID protocol and put it into the platform to actually get into COVID. And that definitely helped us gain a couple of the hospital customers which came in later. So it's a mixed bag. Yeah, it's in a way it's a boon, because it actually moved the technology stride a little bit more and got into some of our stories in terms of what we can do further.
Yeah, and it has also forced us to reinvent our business models, because continuing with the same business model would not have helped. And the prolonged period of pandemic also made a big dent on that number of patients coming regularly from 4 or 5 specialists, and that suddenly went down, right? But then, as I said, necessity is the mother of innovation, and a lot of things happen. We somehow, the good work that we did got made us visible, and we got us an entry into a hospital, and then that opened up another door. So I think that's how it is with everyone's lives, and I suppose it's with every startup as well. You find some doors closing, some doors opening, and we tend to be grateful for both, because if the doors hadn't closed, probably the new doors wouldn't have opened, right? That shows us a path towards scaling up. Even the same very doctors or specialists who said, hey, I don't have time to take care of these patients, though I want them to be well cared for. Can you do it? They started saying, hey, I have time and I will take care of them, right? So that again forced us to change. Maybe we need to tweak our business model. They want to take care, so why don't we help them take care rather than we doing their job? So that's the kind of churn that's going on now in our business model reinvention to see how do we enable. So healthcare has come to a stage where it is ready to continue to take care of patients even after discharge from a hospital, right? Where so far it was resistant to. So now for us, it's an opportunity to say, how do we enable that? And who are all those people? At what levels? What kind of enablement do they need, right? So it's a whole gamut of things to be discovered and quickly put in place.
Right. So then, Sridhar, between the first and the second wave, what kind of patient behavior did you note, especially in the second wave when the medical infrastructure was obviously overwhelmed? And did you see more patients in that duration? Did that lead to easier penetration for a service like yours, where fear of newness is often a roadblock?
Yeah, I think the first wave was actually came in gradually, because there was an alert all over the country and everybody knew what is coming and precautions were taken. So it was almost a very, very slow ramp, right? So I think during that time, what happened, however, was the government had brought in a lot of initiatives to deliver care at home. Many organizations came forward to say we can offer free care. There is this free telephone lines from doctors who are willing to be consulted. And at that point of time, there were not many who were wanting a care from Ubiqare unless things became very complex. And in the first wave, it was well managed. Not many got into that stage. So we had a small share of the people wanting to take be take care for by Ubiqare. And by that time, Ubiqare had a brand name of palliative care and cancer care and those kind of things, right? So suddenly you go and say, hey, you know what, we can do COVID care too. That becomes a little bit of a problem unless they know you well. But then the St. John thing happened, right? So when we launched our package, they said, hey, we can do this. Why, if you are doing this, we can do this better than you. So why don't we join together? So if you say in the first wave, the greatest thing that we did in terms of an impact was that through St. John, we took care of a lot of patients who otherwise would have had to go to hospital.
Okay.
That's a badge that we would actually put on our label. I mean, of course, we did take care of some of our patients who we knew who came naturally. We also went around in the community educating them how to deal with COVID care. That brought us some visibility. So we tried all kinds of things to penetrate and become more visible. And we do think in Bangalore, we did succeed there. In the second wave, things happened. Overall, the nation was caught off guard, right? We were all sleeping and all the previous mechanisms had all been wound up. COVID care centers had been closed and suddenly everything ran short. And unfortunately, we did get a lot of patients for home care, but we also got a lot of calls, distress calls for, please give us beds at home, please give us oxygen. I mean, send somebody to do this. And then we said, that is where we drew the line. And we said, we can't risk, if you are at a certain level of criticality, we should not care for you at home because that's riskier than finding you a place in the hospital. So we had to take that call, but then nevertheless, it tested us in the sense of being able to handle so many calls at once. So we quickly realized that how we need to be organized better. We created a flow of how to deal with some inquiries. I think those are the things that we take away and say, next time we scale up and we would get something like 100 calls in a day. We know how to handle it, right? So that was a good takeaway from the second wave as well.
So can we say Ubiqare is now prepared for the third wave?
Oh, very much.
Pretty much. Prepared. One thing actually, what has happened is during this course of these different waves, as Sundar mentioned, there's also a different perception of how the community is looking at this entire pandemic as a whole. First wave, there was a lot of mystery around it, so there was a lot of care. Second wave, we have seen personnel who are willing to even go home, even if the patient has there, and then we were able to support a lot of patients. Now we see that that acceptance and that fear is not anymore there, and then that support infrastructure is there. So definitely we are much more better prepared for third wave, Ubiqare as well as the community too. And with the help we're getting from various people like CCAMP, Social Alpha, and other as they incubate, definitely we're much better prepared.
Right. Nandita, I would want to bring you in here. As an accelerator program, what opportunities and drawbacks did the COVID-19 bring, and how did you tackle it?
Yeah, so as Sridhar and Sundar mentioned, when the first wave struck, our single most focus was on identifying the innovations that could be quickly deployed. And once we had them on board, the next step was obviously for us to deploy the organization, so the innovations. And so therefore we had to see what exactly each of those identities. So we shortlisted in 30 days. In fact, we shortlisted 30 innovations. and how they could be, what each one had different needs and asks for deployment. And so we had to put together, a lot of partners came on board to also support this whole initiative. So I think I won't say there were drawbacks. I think because from every situation one learns a thing, and one can adapt to like how they repurpose their platform. So it's not, I won't say there were really any drawbacks, but it was the learning curve was definitely there in terms of what we could do and how we could quickly sort of this thing. But in terms of an opportunity and in terms of the impact of not only the soft impact of being having a satisfaction, but of actually having deployed these lot of these innovations when and where they were needed is immense. So I would certainly not like to think of it as drawbacks, because there weren't any. There were just opportunities which we were able to sort of take forward.
Right.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, I noticed that CCAMP, the CCIDA, was one of the earliest such initiatives to come in, right? Subsequently, a lot of others followed suit. I mean, you had the ACT coming in, and you had many other incubators and other government organizations pitching in. But what I remember telling myself was, oh, wow, this is very fast, right? I mean, even before others could react, CCIDA had actually got into it.
Yeah, exactly. That's where I mentioned, in the beginning, that it was that opportunity spotting from CCAMP, and of course led by Tasleem, who actually saw that and say that, we have these few things, and, the thing to be able to look at a long term, though the need was immediate, there were certain things that we knew will, come up in the long term thing. And I think that's where we were able to put together all, the partners. Our own team, the CCAMP team, was, it was an incredible effort. And it also gave us a sense of, I would say, a sense of purpose, a sense of pride, that, as they say, every small drop, counts, makes an ocean. Yes. So I think it was that sense of thing that, for the team also to be able to, do something like this, because otherwise it was a very the situation was so different, and we had never unprecedented. We had never seen such a situation in our lifetime until now. So it really was in many ways it was a fantastic experience.
Sundar and Sridhar, you mentioned briefly about the CCDA program itself. Can you dive deep into what kind of assistance are we talking about here that you received from the CCDA program?
There are various things, right from what you call awareness, right from in terms of there are a lot of forums where we participated by virtue of CCIDA, where actually with respect to the kind of work which you are doing, number one. A lot of avenues where we could actually pitch in and say that this is what Ubiqare has been doing for COVID, and those opportunities have been actually put to us. Mentorship with respect to certain direction as to what we can actually do has been quite helpful actually.
Right.
Anything else from that? Actually?
Yeah, and I think it's like I mentioned earlier also, the timing was perfect, right? And I think also engaging your story to cover us, and that in turn allowed us to be covered more and more. So we became quite better known than we ourselves would have otherwise managed, right? And I think that visibility also led to another thing that BIRAC actually picked us up as one of the startups which need to be fast-tracked, and say that, hey, you guys go take this money. And it was a kind of a very interesting conversation. So in one of the meetings we pitched, and then we said they reviewed it. You pitched, but what did you do about it? We said, we don't have money. Oh, you don't have money? Yeah, we asked for money. You didn't give us money. We pitched it. So they said, all right, we'll fast track you and give you money, right? So I remember quite well that we said, look, we have only so much money to survive. We know what can be done, but beyond this, we can't do that. And I think probably with CCAMP and the CCIDA also helped us get there. And net result was we were able to demonstrate, have a robust COVID platform, which after St. John's, 2 other hospitals have now taken it up. And we want to further mature it into a kind of a plug-in annex, virtual annex for a hospital, so that you can take this in and you can go and get treatment. I think these various kinds of real life needs help us make the platform more robust, business model more robust, and we make progress.
Right. So Ubiqare is currently working with St. John's Hospital in Bangalore and also the JSS Hospital in Mysore. Ubiqare also connects patients to the best nursing agencies and care aggregators. Now we are a part of the CCAMP network as well. So all of this highlights a very prominent need to collaborate in addressing any healthcare issue. So what's your learning so far?
Yeah,
I think Sridhar's favorite topic. I'll let him answer.
Sure. Yeah, actually, like I said in the beginning itself, it's a team ultimately who's actually reaching out to the patients overall. It's a collaboration, and at different points of there are different stakeholders. Be it the what we call caregivers, members of the family, the doctor, the specialists, the nurses, the entire ecosystem of the various different people coming together, touch what is happening, and ensure the impact.
Because you have the business model needs to work well.
Right.
All the partners linked together, none of them should feel that they are losing, right? So, and at the same time, none of them should develop or build something that the other can do. So it's not very easy to pull off. And so we must take baby steps there. We must actually split the problem into smaller and smaller parts and demonstrate that this works and that this can be trusted. And that we are not here to take away patients from one and another. We are here collectively to serve the patient.
Right.
It's much more difficult than it sounds. So that's the reason why it is probably a fertile ground for innovation, a fertile ground for technology to play a role in, economics to play a role in, policies to play a role in, right? How do you sort out legal implications amongst the partners? So a lot of things have to come in place, which I hope CCAMP would actually also make it in their agenda to identify, because if they are able to crack this and help startups crack this, then this would be an enabler for a lot of startups who depend on a collaborative ecosystem to take their situation forward.
On a lighter note, while we are doing way back in, that's why Sundar talked about saying Sridhar's favorite topic. One thing we keep saying at that point of time, hum. Anybody talks about may, I will say hum. So we are known as the hum philosophers. So,
Lovely. I hope you continue to hum around. But yeah, one first thing I think I would want you to again request all of you to increase your volume one more notch higher. Sure. Throughout this conversation, one thing is very clear, that Ubiqare now is allowing a service that will help patients to be shifted at home at a place of their comfort. But what kind of challenges are you facing in the deployment space? How are you dealing with this?
You want me to take Sundar, or you want to go ahead?
Yeah, you go ahead.
Yeah. See, actually, so Sundar touched on this. Although from a collaboration point of view, when you're talking about bringing it together is what we are trying to go for. So when you're trying to deploy it, getting all these different stakeholders to come together and how we can actually pay that is a challenge by itself. It's a huge challenge. Not to mention, let's look at the simple thing as to how we can actually enable follow-up care at home. So having the right trained clinical staff who can actually do physical touch, finding them, ensuring that they are available and putting that into is definitely a challenge. The other challenge is basically the trust. Unlike other elements, there is a personal touch between the patient and the doctor. The specialist has a personal touch, so he really doesn't know and appreciate what is the kind of a physical touch is going on at home. So a lot of people, a lot of doctors, have this question mark as to who would be a trusted network and who can actually provide that. So how can you enable that kind of a trust collaboration so that doctors inherently are able to extend their care at home? And the third element, of course, is that everybody is now talking about AI, ML, everything else, predictive, and so on. But ultimately, it's the data and what kind of data, which is very specific here, and how we can put together to bring in that right mechanism of things. It becomes another problem. So the question right now is that overall, getting them all together finally needs adequate funding. And putting this entire equation in front of investor, explaining that this journey is like this, wherein, of course, investor is also looking from a different point, is also on the challenges. So if you talk about deployment, of course, we are facing all these various different challenges. The good part is that, yeah, we have good, what do you call, people to back us, like CCAMP, Social Alpha, and we are also like part of Sign and HTIC. All of them are backing us with respect to right kind of mentoring and right kind of whatever support which can come at due point of time. So we're on the journey, but there are a lot of deployment challenges which we still have to clear.
Yeah, so that's, Sridhar spoke about deployment from our side, but I will also talk about deployment from the customer side, right? I mean, even if it is at the individual patient's place,
right?
How do they adapt to this? How do they? There's a lot of change required, right from allowing a strange person to come in inside their lives, taking care of the patient, getting their lives disrupted. How to get that back in control? There's a lot of change management there, which we have to deal with if we have to get them to take our solution for their own good. Even on the hospital side, just yesterday, Sridhar and I were working out how do we, having expressed the desire to do this, how do we help them manage the deployment?
Right.
What are the things that need to change inside them, right? Because change management is the most important thing. And the greatest competition that we have is the legacy. Right? Why don't we continue what we are doing? And our deployment strategy needs to somehow take care of that change management, and that becomes a very crucial element for us.
Right. So now that the Ubiqare team has,
and then we can bring it down to practical terms, because it's always good to start from a moon and then come down to Earth, right? So we are actually, we would like to think that we are throwing the seeds of a virtual hospital for follow-up care in India, right? So you can just imagine 5 years later or 10 years later, you get discharged from a hospital, you go home, you check into Ubiqare as a virtual hospital, and everything else falls in place.
Right.
You get the same kind of follow-up care that you would have got in a hospital. Yeah, that's there, right? So coming down here, how do we get to there from here? So we start segmenting the problem into different illnesses and make sure that each of the illnesses are well understood. There are protocols backing them up. There are workflows that work. There's an ecosystem that will come in. And then the hospitals and the doctors are familiar with the platform. So another visual for you is a patient is sitting in front of the doctor. He is checking out on a discharge. Before discharge, he asks him, where does he live? What is his illness? Everything is there in the system. He identifies this is the protocol to be followed. These are the people who are in my network. They will take care of you. They know exactly what I want you to do. And this is the package. And then you go home. By the time you go home, everything is set up and you're good for go, right? So we want to be able to get there for at least one illness. If you can demonstrate that.
Right.
And then, of course, it has to be economically viable for both. It has to be affordable, and all those kind of challenges are there. But that's the first step that we are heading towards.
Just to add on to it, like I said, I mean, the beginning, the patient journey comes very broadly. There's a diagnostic phase where doctor is consulted. There's a treatment phase, what we call IPD, where the patient gets admitted to hospital. And there's a long follow-up care phase. So our vision and goal, like Sundar pointed out exactly what we wanted. How can we make impact on the follow-up care, and how can we enable all the specialists, doctors, hospitals, and everybody to reach out to the patients to make the right impact, while yet retaining the trust and loyalty of the patients, and whatever is required to make this interaction more meaningful, for right outcomes is where we would like to be focusing on. And
Yes.
step by step, we are building on the journey. Today, we are to a certain level as platform as a service. We will be adding additional features onto it. Over a period of time, we'll make it more interactive, and more data will come in, and more systems will come into place with respect to how a patient can be managed effectively. So we'll add on to one at a time. We are not overawed by the technology part of it, because by virtue of our experience, what we have done, any technological challenge or problem can be done, and it is feasible. We are looking at how we can make the business model and the end-to-end solution part of it. And that's where we are taking step by step in approaching this problem.
Good luck.
And of course,
yes,
if you
yes,
see
sure.
that we already have seen the evidence of that growing in St. John's, right? In 3 months,
Right.
they could actually already make sure that many people could be cared for without having to come to hospital. So those numbers are already there. It's a matter of ramping it up further from there and realize the benefits on both sides and then push forward. So I would actually like to think that we are at the cusp of something quite big. Unless we screw it up, we should probably be able to take it on the uptake.
Right.
With good funding,
luck,
of course.
Yes, very important. Good luck. I hope this dream of yours becomes a reality soon. Nandita, I would like to bring you in here. Ubiqare is a part of the CCAMP, CCDA, and the CSAP programs. How are these programs different, and how do programs such as these benefit startups, especially in a testing time like the COVID time?
Yeah. So the CCDA program was launched very specifically, as I said, to actually look for innovations and products that are readily deployable,
right,
and provide a very specific input to deploy them to the market. And that was the thing. In the CSAP program, that is the CCAMP Startup Advancement Program, which we also run another one similar to CSAP for the Karnataka startups, which is called the Karnataka Startup Advancement Program, KSAP. There, what we do is we take startups at any stage of their journey. It could be an idea stage. It could be, they could have achieved POC. And we take that as the start and work with them for about a year to 18 months, 12 to 18 months.
right,
and look at every aspect of their, whatever the startup requires. So it could be, clinical validation. It could be help with design of the product. It could be regulatory pathway. It could be, intellectual property. It could even be HR and team. How do you sort of ramp up a team? So we look at every aspect in the advancement program and try to address, all of these together. So collectively, the whole venture as such, moves ahead. And the objective is obviously to, it is a life science venture is, as we all know, quite an arduous and long journey. There are regulatory issues, there are funding issues, there are team issues, there are as Sundar and Sridhar pointed out, collaborations that one needs to look for. How we help them is in all of these areas. We help them, and make them interact with people who have had experience in the past.
Experience,
and experience and expertise in these areas, and who've done some of these things and probably know what is the best way to approach some of these things. And that, I think, is absolutely invaluable, because it's really what that what translates on the ground. Thing. So the advancement program is a longer duration, looks at a lot of all the aspects. It's a 360-degree view of every aspect that a startup needs. Whereas the CCDA was very specific. We have a product which we think can be used during these pandemic times for COVID. This is what it requires to be brought out into the market. Those things could be just 2 or 3 things. We may not worry about team so much, or we may not worry about a couple of other things so much. Right now, what is it that is required? You need funding. Okay, this is what we can offer. You need some, to sort out the regulatory issues. This is what we can do, and put them out in the market. So that's very specific areas that they look at. Just wanted to add here, since we're talking about stories of hope. and probably we missed mentioning this, is that how we were all waiting for the vaccine to come out, right? The vaccines that have this thing, and so proud to say that we have vaccines from India as well. I think that has also given us a lot of hope to get through this pandemic. We were waiting for vaccines. We not only got vaccines, we got vaccines from India, and now we are on this mission to sort of vaccinate a lot of our, I mean, not lots, hopefully all our country. And recently, as you saw, that there is also for the children, right? For 12 and above, a company has come up with a vaccine. So I think that is the magic, that is the of life sciences, of biotechnology, that one can look forward to.
Right. Sundar and Sridhar, you are a part of a very prominent and effective program such as the CCAMP, the Karnataka Startup Advancement Program cohort, and also the Atal Innovation Mission seed-funded startup at CCAMP. So what kind of boost do such programs offer for new entrants? What has been your experience with that?
Yeah, actually, it's very, one thing is, we can say very clearly is that we are from the industry. We have about 30 years experience in running teams, building projects, and so on. And when it comes to, however, solving a specific problem in area, you won't know everything. So there are a lot of areas where we actually lack, and the mechanisms in all these places like KSAP, or all this mentorship which you get, that kind of awareness and kind of exposure we get, there's a lot of learning. And that's what we have actually done. I can see where we were in 2017 with respect to whatever pitches we have been making to external places, the kind of business plan we have actually put into place, where we are today with respect to the pitches which we are making, the kind of plan which we have put into place, and what we are doing. There's a whole lot of a difference. And it's not that we were 4 years back, we were not experienced, we were. But yet, with respect to this kind of exposure which you get by being part of these various different programs, is phenomenal. And some of these people who come in and give us this, it's like a eureka. Like you said, that aha moments. This is what we're missing. This is what is required to be done. So there's a great deal of exposure, awareness, where the market is going on, what is required to be done, how to put it entire thing together, where should be the focus, what should be the priority. It's one thing just talking about it, and one thing to actually get that eureka feel of it, and that really makes a lot of difference. So I would say all these programs have been very beneficial. And if we are getting benefit out of such programs, I'm sure there's a huge lot of benefit for a lot of people, and it's very much required.
Yeah, I would like to just add to that, because for me, it's both for me and Sridhar also. The KSAP selection and the Atal Innovation Mission came at a very defining moment for us, right? I remember just prior to that, Sridhar and I were breaking our heads wondering what to do. We don't even see ourselves surviving beyond a certain number of months, right? How do we crack this? And we were from the old guard. We did not really want to do something by exaggerating some of the market pictures and things like that. We didn't want to do that. We said, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, we close. And then we were a little concerned that there is a problem out there which has to be solved, and yet we are not able to get there. And this KSAP selection came out as a first door to open, right? I think that's, for us, that was a big defining moment for us. Because with KSAP coming up, also was willing to support us. So that's another thing that came in. Then Atal Innovation Mission gave us some grant. It's like you are at sea and somebody throws a lifeboat, you get onto it, and then you make your way and try to figure out the things around you, keep steer of the sharks around you, and then you have more things coming up. So for us, it's a very, the connect with CCAMP and is quite emotional that way, right? That's what I would like to say, that I hope Nandita will pass on to Taslim. I haven't had the opportunity to tell that to him yet.
I think Tasleem and Niranjan, my colleague, have really worked with Ubiqare and interacted a lot. So Niranjan keeps sharing things with me very often. So I think we are equally passionate about Ubiqare and the journey of our startups. So, but it's really nice to hear this part of it as well. Because we usually hear, what he said earlier, like they helped us to get funding or visibility or thing, but it's nice to know that we can connect at different levels. So thanks, thanks for saying that.
Nandita, for startups out there who are looking for mentorship and a playground to evolve, what's the process to be a part of CCAMP's program?
Yeah, so the process is the KSAP program, which is the Startup Advancement Program, is a call which we will launch every year, and there is a selection criteria. If you are asking just about the process, but anybody can be a part of CCAMP and seek mentorship or be part of our network. They can just write to us, anybody from the team or anybody at CCAMP. Me or anybody, hum, as they would say, any one of us, and we will of course. So there has to be some rationale in the science. The science has to work. We can help them demonstrate how the science can work, but the basic principle is that the science has to have merit. I think if that criteria is there, we are open and welcome to have any of the startups come and join us, and be very happy to help. Our forte, of course, is working with early stage startups, right? Very early stage startups where we can help them in the scientific, IP, regulatory issues. We do work also with slightly more advanced startups where it's related to commercializations, market strategy, scale up, and all of that. So having said that, I think they just need to send us an email, and we would be happy to work with anybody. And I think Sridhar and Sundar have very eloquently put forth what programs such as these, such as what we run, think. So I probably won't say anything more about that.
Thank you. I think this has been a very wonderful conversation. I think very insightful inputs have come in. I think with that we've come to the end of the conversation.